I remember I used to always go on YouTube, and this was just when I was just getting into fitness. And I would watch quite a lot of fitness influencers. I would try and see what their advice was, what they could do to help me, especially with dieting, because I was skinny and I was trying to bulk up. And I found that a lot of their advice was just more or less the same. They were telling people to just bulk up as much as you can. Normally during the winter season, you just put on as much weight as you can. And then when it comes to the summer period, that's when you try and just skim down the fat. You go kind of extreme with your diet and you'd go on what's called a cut. And I also found that when they were doing this, they would say that, calories in, calories out was a thing, which is essentially just saying that you should just be tracking your calories and you shouldn't actually be looking at the substance of what the calories are made up of. You should just be following how many calories you're taking in, and it should be more than the amount of calories you're burning if you want to bulk, and then vice versa if you want to cut. So I found that I kind of got caught up with this advice, even though it is quite basic level advice. And so I started to eat how a lot of these fitness influencers were eating. I would often go to get KFC and get fast food takeaways, just because I was only really worried about building muscle, and I wasn't really concerned about the impact that it would have on my body, and I wasn't concerned on the impact that this would have on my health and long term and everything. And so I started buying into it. I started eating like that. And I just found that when I did eat like this, I just felt like my energy levels would be so much lower. And I also felt like I just felt worse in general. And my performance in the gym was also not really where it should have been. I felt like I was putting on more fat easily. I wasn't putting on muscle as easily when you buy into this calories in, calories out concept. And I just found that when I did this, my physique actually got worse over time. I wasn't actually performing as well. I wasn't hitting my PRs. I wasn't looking as good. And fast forward a few years to where I am now, I know that calories in, calories out, it's not actually an accurate depiction of what you should be eating and how you should diet. A few years later, I started to eat more healthy, more organically, and I felt like I just stopped tracking my calories. I felt like it wasn't that useful. And I just started to just focus on eating clean, eating high protein, high fat diets, and just eating food that I knew was organic and healthy and was going to boost my health long term. And I also found that when I did this, it also led to a significant amount of fat loss and muscle growth at the same time. I'll put a picture up on screen of what I look like now after kind of implementing this diet, which I'll go over today, where instead of actually just worrying about counting these macronutrients, I just worried about the substance of these macronutrients. I worried about things like, instead of counting calories, I was just worried about actually what was in the calories, what the calories were made up of, and things like that. And I found that this boosted my mood, it boosted everything else in my life, and I just felt so much better, so much more well-rounded. And in addition to that, I could trim fat a lot easier, and I also found I could build on muscle quite a lot better as well. So the reason why calories in, calories out is a scam is because this is just essentially saying that a calorie is just the same as any other calorie, and it doesn't matter how you get that calorie. And this has actually been proven to be false so many times. It's more about the substance of what you're eating and the substance of what makes up those calories that's more important. This is why you see so many pro athletes are extremely strict with their diet. And you also see this in a lot of other people as well. You see this in people who are in high performance sports. You see this in people who are football players, basketball players, everything. A lot of them are extremely strict on their diet. And this is because at this level, with high level nutritionists, you actually start to understand that a calorie isn't the same as any other calorie. And you start to really understand that if you buy into this calories in, calories out concept, yes, you're going to be hitting your macronutrients, but this is actually, if you have calories from sources like fast food as opposed to organic healthy food, it's just going to completely change the way your body processes these calories, and it's going to completely change your output if your input isn't correct. Therefore, you're going to feel a lot more slow, a lot more lethargic. you're also going to put on fat a lot easier, and it's going to be harder to put on muscle. I also want to talk about why cutting and bulking isn't the right way to go about it. I've found that because if you do this during the bulking season, just for 3 months, you're just guaranteeing that you're not going to have a nice physique at all. You're going to be overweight, you're going to have a ton of fat, you're not going to have abs, and you're just trying to put on as much weight as you possibly can. And even though some of this will be muscle, a lot of it is just ends up being fat. So if you spend all this time putting on this weight, and then when it gets to more the summer periods and it's time to cut, you just spend all this time just cutting down all of the weight you've actually put on. I just felt like this was a little bit less sustainable and I just felt like it's a really unenjoyable process where you're having to be so strict on your diet for a few months of the year just to try and look good for a couple months before you go bulking and you do it all again. And I just felt like this was a little bit pointless. And when I actually did this and I started bulking and cutting, I just found that overall I would just make significantly less muscle gains in the gym. So I want to talk about exactly what diet you should be on and which diet that I went on, which built me up this physique in this was a little over a year it took me to actually build this physique once I got onto this diet and once I started taking diet seriously. And I found that by far the healthiest diet and the best diet for muscle growth and bodybuilding it's more of like a carnivore diet. It's where you're prioritizing a lot of red meat, you're eating a ton of steak, you're eating things like chicken, nuts, berries, but essentially you're just literally cutting down your diet so that you're actually simplifying it a lot more, and all you're eating are things like fruit, vegetables, some nuts, and then just like red meat. And if you do this, and also, you can also have eggs as well, and also raw milk. Those are really going to help with high levels of fat in your system, which is going to lead to the growth hormone that you need to build muscle, and that's also really going to help you. So I found that if you started to do this, and when I started to do this personally, not only was it just so much easier to build on muscle, just because the substance of what I was taking in was actually so much more healthy, so much more beneficial for my body, which led to a ton more muscle growth. I also found that I started to feel so much better throughout the day. I felt that, your self-confidence goes up, your self-perception goes up, and you just feel so much more confident. And just throughout the day, everything just kind of feels a little bit better because you're not actually inputting all these toxins into your body from a lot of fast food restaurants and things, which a lot of these fitness influencers advertise when they're going on a bulk. So if you can do this, if you can cut down your diet and simplify it, and just think about what our ancestors used to eat back in the days. If you then think about back then, more than 200 to 300 years ago, a lot of these sicknesses, which are becoming so common these days, and a lot of these diseases, a lot of these allergies, they were virtually non-existent. So think for a second and just think about what were our ancestors actually eating back 200-300 years ago. And the answer to this question is just literally they were just eating things like butter. They were cooking their food with butter and olive oil. They weren't using any seed oils or vegetable oils, which have been proven to be very bad for you. They were using proper butter, proper olive oil. They were getting proper fats in. And they were also eating things like steak, chicken. They were eating very little processed food. They weren't going to fast food restaurants. And they were just eating ingredients that were single ingredient meals. So they would be having things like steak, chicken, vegetables, and they would be having things like fruit as well. And then, so they'd only be eating things like steak, vegetables, fruit, chicken, eggs, butter, nuts. And you would see that back in the day, a lot of these obesity issues that we have now, they were kind of non-existent. People would just naturally look in so much better shape, like our ancestors used to look, just without even really trying. And essentially this was just because the diet was just so effective, it was so healthy, that they would put on like a nice good amount of muscle growth, and they didn't even need to go to the gym to do so. So because of this, I recommend going ahead with a simplified diet. It doesn't have to be carnivore, but make sure that it's more of an organic diet and make sure that you're aware of the exact ingredients that you're taking in day out. because it's going to have a huge effect on your body's ability to build muscle, how you feel throughout the day, and everything else in your life. If you want to have a look at my paid course, I'll link that down in the description below. It's on pre-sale now, it's $49. And if you want me to go more in depth and more into detail about what I eat in a day and the diet that I use exactly, then I've put that in the course below. So if you want to check that out, go click the link in the description.